Alrighty guys, I'm gonna work through an example problem for you that will, let's see, let me make sure I'm sharing the right screen. There we go. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and walk through problem 3 from lab 5, just kind of give you guys some debugging tips. One of the big things that I missed in my first video that I kind of noticed was really helpful for this problem 3 in lab 5 is breakpoints, and we're going to go over what those are real quick. And yeah, so here we go. So in the problem, yeah, so here we go. So in this problem, it says loop through integer values of 1 to 18 based on the value of x. Assign y to a value based on the ordering of the rules below. Make a table displaying values of x and y. So it should look something like that. So if x is a multiple of 3, go ahead and divide what x is by 3. If it's even, take the square root. Anything else, triple the value of x. So that's that. So yeah, so here we go. This problem's kind of already done. So you can just kind of see, you go ahead and make y, you fill that up with zeros, and then we go ahead and design z, which is what we're going to step through. Now, one thing I'll say is, this is just an example. So I used something that I had done from previous year. What I will say is that one way to do this, you don't really need to have z and then an x here. Like, there's a couple different ways where you could just do the for loop for a variable that's already created. But yeah, so we have that, and so it runs through and it does exactly what we just spoke. It's divisible by 3 using the mod function, and you get a remainder of 0. Then we're going to make it that x in the z container of the array or vector. We're going to divide that by 3. If that doesn't happen, if this statement's false, then we're going to drop down to here. It's divisible by 2, which also means it's even. And the remainder is 0, then we're going to take the square root of that value. And then if we haven't caught any of those stipulations, then we'll drop down to the else, multiply the value by 3, whatever that current value is. So an issue that some people had that I had helped with the other evening was that they had a couple of the stuff kind of really, like I'm just showing you kind of some of the stuff that they were doing, which can make it really confusing. So when you have it not tabbed correctly, there are some programming languages that will not run unless you have things tabbed correctly. I'm pretty sure Python's like that because you don't terminate things with semicolons. But yeah, so make sure if things aren't tabbed right and you've included your end statements, go ahead and bring it to the top line, hit enter, and it'll drop it down to where it needs to be. If you don't feel like figuring that out. So, and then if you want to tab everything over, you just highlight everything and hit tab. Shift tab takes it back. So yeah. So there we go. And then let's make sure this end is lined up correctly. This. All of this. So yeah, so we have this for statement, we're going to loop through it. And one of the things that people couldn't understand was they were making the table, they had something like this line. So they had this current line, they actually had this inside the loop, and because their margins were a little off, not cleaned up, they were creating a table each time, which was a problem. So So like I said, make sure you have all of your tabs correct. And yeah. And then another thing that people had a problem with was they couldn't understand why their y, LOL, was only holding one value. And so whenever they would make a table, they couldn't because it was just one value long instead of needing the same amount as their variable 1 in the table. And so what they were doing is they had something like this, and they couldn't see what was going on. They didn't understand what the problem was. So right now I'm going to show you how I kind of help them to the solution. So we run section. First of all, it's going to say the table's not working. And if we check to see what y is, you see right here it says 6. That's because the last time x is 18, which is divisible by 3, we get 6 here. But where it's saving this 6 is in y. So if you look over in your workspace, it has the value 6, which is what we saw over here in the command window. Which means every time it's running, when x is 1, it goes down here, assigns a value to y, and it's rewriting it each time. And so that's kind of what that's for, is that it's accessing a container, or it's accessing a position in the container of y, so that it's inserting it and iterating at the same time. So y1, y2, and so forth until it gets to the end. Yeah, so we have that table command here. And so what I showed them to kind of check was, I said, okay, let's place a breakpoint here. So if you see, it's right next to the numbers. So these are numbered for each line of code. And you can place a breakpoint. And so when you do that, this is grayed out right now because I have to hit play again. Breakpoints get reset when you save and run the script, which is what run does, opposed to run section. So we're going to go ahead and hit run. And so you can see this green arrow shows that it stopped right now. So a way that you use this to debug is you say, okay, with these values over in the workspace, we have this x is currently 3 because it's the first time that it meets this. And so what is y going to be equal? So up here, you can use some of the shortcuts. But yeah, we're going to step. So when we step, it goes and makes x equal to 4. So we're going to step again and see that now y is going to be rewritten to 2. And so that's kind of what I showed them, because sometimes you should be looking at your workspace, but sometimes it doesn't give you enough insight into what exactly is going on each iteration. So the examples for for loops, while loops, and you're trying to see okay, each time it goes in there, is it ever entering this if statement or this else statement? So yeah, so there you can see, and then right away they knew oh, we're just rewriting the value. So I had reminded them that the previous labs, we actually went over how to do this, and this isn't the first pretty much every semester, because there's kind of some other stuff that happens in between this problem and previous labs where we first talked about vectors and accessing their basically indexing. People tend to forget oh, I need to include that line or that y sub x so that I can go ahead and not rewrite all of y and write one value, but to also just keep stepping along with the x. So you can see now, when we run this, I'm going to get rid of the breakpoint. Go ahead and run this. Go ahead and get what we were looking for in the problem. And so another thing, and this is just info. This is just the kind of level that I would expect. Like, this was a 3 credit hour course or something, and someone wanted to get an A in the course, I'd expect them to make every single thing look pristine, because that's what programmers are supposed to do. People who don't program, they don't want things explained or why you couldn't achieve something. They want to see, like, you're the person that I assigned to do this. Did you make it happen? It's a yes or no. And so if we don't have these lines right here, go ahead and comment those out. This is what we end up getting for our table. var1 and y. And there's some reasoning as to why it doesn't give its z value, but even on top of that, we wouldn't want z to appear as the variable name, because that's not what was asked for. We want x. So the way that we get around that is we assign the table to a t. So t is holding this table. And so a table is a data structure within MATLAB that has properties, and you can see whenever I type t, which is at the bottom, it's kind of hard to see this highlight, but if I type t in properties, and I hit a dot again, some will kind of like other programming languages like C or whatever, they would show you what you could access, so like variable names or whatever other properties this data structure has. So if you want to know how to access charts or like graphs, and you want something to be really specific, you're probably going to need to use the properties of that data structure to access their variable names or something like that, or a color, instead of doing it as soon as you're running the command to do that. So that's that. And yeah, you can see here, since var1 is what appears down here, I said, okay, change this variable name to x, and you can see y is here, so we said change that variable to y. And that's how you do it perfect. That would be a 100% in my book. I know in the not in the lecture, but in the lab, obviously it was assigned with a different professor and everything. It says if the input x is ... And you can't assign, because it is a variable name, you can't assign a variable name that has spaces. You can't assign a variable name that has special characters like an ellipse. So this would be fine. And if I was writing the lab, I wouldn't put that in there, because someone like me who's like, oh, you want me to do this? I'm going to do exactly what it says. That's not even attainable. So, and maybe there's like some special magic to where they could, or I don't think so. I mean, you would basically need to use underscores and leave the ellipse out. But yeah, that's pretty much everything for today. And that was just just to recap, a little info on debugging with the breakpoint, and using some of the breakpoint commands. And as you can see, like if we're doing this, there's different ones. There's step in, step out. So if I want to step in here, even though it's not going to go in, or yeah, you can see here, if there were other, like if there was a function that you wrote, which we're going to get to pretty soon, you could step into it and it would go to that function, and you would be able to mess in there. Otherwise, if you just stepped, it would step over it and it would execute it without going inside into that function. Yeah, and then if you wanted to get out of there really quick instead of to keep going, you would step out. You do run a cursor. There's a bunch of stuff in there. You guys should just play around with it, because breakpoints is something you are going to use anytime you're using an IDE, or like a little GUI type thing to run your scripts and code. So like Python or this, whatever. Yeah, so I hope that was helpful. And like I said, if you guys watch this, you kind of got a little freebie on how to execute problem 3. That's everything. So good luck on lab 6.